I should have known the moment Claire asked me to be her maid of honor that things were going to get complicated. Not because I didn't want to. God, no. Claire's been my best friend since college, since the night we got locked out of our dorm during a fire drill and ended up barefoot in the quad, laughing over a shared cigarette and a bag of stale vending machine pretzels. There's history between us. Real history. But Claire's idea of honesty has always been a little flexible. I'm counting on you, she'd said, holding my hands across the kitchen island like a woman clutching a lifeline. I want this day to be perfect. And I'd smiled, nodded, promised, like a good friend does. Now here I am, 3 weeks before the wedding, standing in the middle of a boutique that smells like roses and steamed silk, watching Claire argue with a seamstress about invisible zippers and illusion necklines like she's trying to distract herself from something else entirely. Do you think I should go with the cathedral veil? She asked suddenly, turning toward me with a forced kind of brightness in her eyes. Or is that too much? I didn't answer right away. There was a tightness in her voice I hadn't heard before. Not nerves. Not stress. Something else. Depends, I said. Are you trying to impress the guests or hide from them? She laughed a little too loudly. Wow. Harsh. I smiled, but my gut twisted. Because lately Claire's been different. Not in an obvious way. Not in the ways you can point to and say, see, she's off. No, it's more like this undercurrent of tension, like she's holding her breath and smiling through it. She forgets things. Flinches when her fiancé's name comes up. Once, I caught her staring blankly at her phone screen for so long I had to wave a hand in front of her face. And then there was the rehearsal dinner menu. You told me he's allergic to shellfish, I said, scanning the options. He is, she replied, not even looking up from her phone. Claire, the appetizer is shrimp cocktail. She blinked like she hadn't even registered what she'd chosen. Oh, I'll fix it. Little things like that. Slipping through the cracks. And each time I tell myself it's just wedding stress. Just cold feet. Just Claire being Claire. But then last night she called me. At 11:47 p.m. No hello. No small talk. Just this flat voice on the other end of the line. Can I ask you something? I was already bracing myself. Sure. If someone did something a long time ago, she said, but they're not that person anymore and they love the person they're with now, really love them, do they still have to tell them? I sat up in bed. Claire, what's going on? Silence. I'm serious, she said. Would you want to know? Even if it would ruin everything? And before I could answer, she hung up. Now today she's acting like that conversation never happened. Smiling. Twirling in her dress. Asking me about flower arrangements and whether peonies are too basic. I watch her laugh with the boutique owner and a chill prickles the back of my neck. Something's coming. I don't know what it is yet, but I can feel it in the pit of my stomach. And for the first time since she asked me to stand beside her at the altar, I'm not sure I want to know the truth. The first real warning came during the wine tasting. It was supposed to be fun, a little mid-afternoon escape from spreadsheets and seating charts. Daniel had to work, so it was just me, Claire, and her younger cousin Tessa, who Claire had roped into bridesmaid duty after 2 glasses of rose and a teary phone call. The vineyard was dreamy, all golden light and oak barrels, and for about 10 minutes it almost felt normal again. Then Claire started talking. I still can't believe it's happening, she said, swirling a glass of Chardonnay and not even pretending to spit it out between tastings. Me. Married. It's like some cosmic joke. Tessa giggled. Girl, he's obsessed with you. You basically won the husband lottery. Claire smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. Yeah. Lucky me. She said it like the words were splinters. I gave her a look, one we'd used since college. A sideways glance, eyebrows raised, that said what the hell was that? Claire ignored it. Instead, she reached for the next glass and said way too casually, do you think it's okay if I don't mention the time I dated that guy in Berlin? You know, the one with the motorcycle and the parole bracelet. Tessa's mouth dropped open. Claire. I blinked. You dated him for 8 months. Yeah, but Daniel doesn't know that, she said, laughing like she just told a dirty joke. And I don't think he needs to. I mean, it's not technically lying if it just doesn't come up. Tessa looked at me, then back at Claire. You've told him about all your exes, right? Claire didn't answer. Just sipped her wine and stared out toward the vineyard. Later that night, when we were alone in the car, I finally said it. What are you doing, Claire? She didn't look at me. Just adjusted the volume knob like that was the problem. You're keeping things from him, I said. Big things. And I'm starting to feel like I'm being dragged into something I don't understand. Claire didn't answer right away. But then she said, so softly I almost didn't hear her. You ever love someone so much that you start pretending you're the person they think you are? I felt that sentence like a fist in my gut. That's not love, I said quietly. That's fear. She laughed once, sharp, bitter. Same thing sometimes. There was a long pause. The kind that fills up the whole car like fog. I'm not the person he thinks I am, she added. Not really. But I want to be. And maybe if I get through this wedding, if I can just get that clean slate, I'll become her. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Claire, is there something I should know? She turned toward me then. Her mascara was slightly smudged, and I realized for the first time how tired she looked. Not physically, spiritually. Like someone trying to hold a house of cards together in a wind tunnel. I'll tell you, she said. But not yet. That's not fair. I know. But I need you to trust me. I didn't answer. I just drove, listening to the soft hum of the tires against the road. At the next red light she said, You won't hate me, will you? And for the first time since she asked me to be her maid of honor, I couldn't give her a straight answer. The next time I saw Daniel, I couldn't look him in the eye. We were meeting to finalize the slideshow for the reception. One of those look how far we've come things with baby photos and blurry college party pics. He offered to make dinner for both of us while Claire handled a late fitting. He was always doing things like that. Thoughtful. Present. Which made it worse. I added a few more pictures, he said, gesturing toward the laptop on the table. Some from our trip to Lake George. Remember that one where she fell off the paddleboard and got stung by a bee? I forced a laugh. Yeah. She swelled up like a cartoon character. He grinned, that effortless, open grin Claire used to say made her knees weak. Honestly, I still can't believe she agreed to marry me, he said. I mean, she's Claire. And I'm just a guy who wears khakis to brunch. Don't sell yourself short, I said, trying to keep my voice even. But inside my stomach twisted. Because the version of Claire he was in love with was a version she'd curated. Not faked exactly, but edited, like one of those Instagram influencers who only posts golden hour selfies and captions about gratitude while crying on the bathroom floor in real life. And the thing was, Claire wasn't a bad person. She just had a way of tucking away the parts of herself she didn't want people to see. We all do that to some degree. But with her, it wasn't self-protection anymore. It was performance. And now I was part of the stage crew. Hey, Daniel said suddenly, clicking to a photo of Claire at some art gallery opening, drink in hand mid-laugh. You were there that night, right? She said you were the one who introduced her to that artist. I hesitated. No, that wasn't me. He frowned slightly. Really? That's weird. She swore it was you. My pulse ticked up. Must have been someone else. We weren't hanging out much that summer. That was true technically. That summer, Claire had been dating someone no one in our circle liked. An older guy with money and zero boundaries. She'd shut the world out for a few months, only to resurface like nothing had happened. I'd chalked it up to one of her phases, like the juice cleanse or the 6-week obsession with French cinema. But now it was clear she'd left more out of the story than I thought. Daniel nodded, moving on like it didn't matter. But it did. After dinner, as I helped clear the plates, he turned to me with this easy warmth in his eyes and said, Thanks again, by the way, for being there for her. I know planning this thing hasn't been easy, and Claire, well, she really needs you. I nodded, swallowed hard, and managed, of course. Because what else could I say? Actually, Daniel, Claire's rewriting history. She's leaving out entire chunks of her life. And now she's asking me to help her get away with it. Instead, I took the trash out and stood on the porch, breathing in the cold air like it could wash the guilt off me. That night, I texted Claire. Can we talk soon? Just us. She didn't answer until the next morning. Can we wait until after the bachelorette weekend? Please. I want to enjoy this last bit of peace before everything starts moving too fast. And I let it go. Again. I told myself she'd come clean. Eventually. But deep down, I think I already knew. Claire didn't want to become someone better after the wedding. She just wanted to be believed. The bridal suite was silent. You'd expect nerves on the morning of a wedding, clinking glasses, frantic laughter, the rustle of satin and perfume and hope. But when I opened the door, Claire was already in her dress, standing at the window, not moving. Just staring out at the gray sky like it might offer an escape route. I closed the door behind me. No bridesmaids. No stylists. Just us. I sent them all out, she said without turning around. I didn't speak. Not yet. Do you remember that weekend in college after that guy broke my heart? She asked. The one with the motorcycle? I nodded. You watched The Notebook 3 times in a row. And you made me pancakes in a mug with a hot plate, she smiled faintly. God, we were such disasters. She finally turned to face me. Her makeup was done. Hair curled. Veil pinned. She looked perfect, except her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'm scared, she said. I crossed the room. Sat on the bench across from her. Is it nerves? Or something else? Claire didn't answer right away. I haven't been honest, she whispered like the walls might hear her. Not just about my past. About who I was when Daniel and I started dating. I swallowed. Art. I told him I was single for a year before we met. That I'd done the work. That I was whole. She laughed under her breath. But I wasn't. I was still a mess. Still running from shit I didn't want to deal with. And I dragged someone into that. What happened, Claire? She sat down across from me, her white dress spreading like a sigh. I was seeing someone. Casually. At least that's what I told myself. He was bad news, controlling, always checking my phone, making me feel like I was lucky to have him. I was trying to leave when I met Daniel. And I did. I cut things off. But I wasn't honest with Daniel about the timing. I let her speak. Let her breathe. He thinks he was the beginning of a new chapter. Clean slate. But really, he was the exit. And I let him believe he was something else entirely. I could feel the sweat prickling down my spine. There was one night, early on, when Daniel and I were just starting. I saw the ex again. I shouldn't have. But I did. It was one of those nights where everything feels blurry, like the past wants one last pull at you before it lets go. I didn't sleep with him. But it wasn't nothing. That wasn't the end. She took a breath. Looked at her hands like she didn't recognize them. There was someone else too. Later. It didn't last. But it happened while Daniel and I were on a break. I never told him about that either. I let him believe we were solid the whole time. My mouth was dry. She looked up at me, eyes glassy. I've made so many mistakes. And now I just want to start clean. I want to build something real. I said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, but because the weight of them was too much. Will you still stand with me? She asked, voice cracking. Will you help me get through this day? The room felt too small. Like the truth was crowding in, pressing against the glass. You're asking me to lie, I said. No, she shook her head. I'm asking you not to ruin it. I'm asking you to believe that I can be better now. But he doesn't know who he's marrying. He knows who I am now. Claire. I love him. I love him. And I'm terrified that if I tell him everything, he'll leave. And I won't get to show him who I've become. I stood up, pacing. You're not asking me to support your future, I said. You're asking me to help you bury your past. That's not the same thing. Silence. Except for the ticking of the tiny gold clock on the vanity. Please, she whispered. You're the only one who knows all of it. If you walk out, it's over. I don't think I can go through with it without you. That part? That was real. And that's what broke me. Because I knew her. I knew every fractured, complicated version of her. And I knew how much she'd been trying to hold her life together like some kind of emotional Jenga tower. But I also knew Daniel. And I knew he deserved more than the version of the truth she was packaging into vows. You can't ask me to lie for you, I said again. Not like this. She stood. Straightened her dress. Chin up, eyes wet but defiant. Then don't. But don't ruin this either. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't a villain. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman who had made a series of terrible human choices and hoped love would forgive her for them. But she'd made one more. She'd put me in the middle. There was a knock at the door. 10 minutes, ladies, someone called. Claire wiped under her eyes. Took a breath. Composed herself in an instant. The bride again. I walked to the door. Hand on the handle, I paused. I'm not going to tell him, I said. But I won't stand up there and pretend either. She didn't answer. I stepped out, heels clicking down the hallway. I handed the bouquet to her cousin outside the chapel. Told her there was a change of plans. Then I left. I didn't stay to see her walk down the aisle. I didn't hear the vows. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, she sent a text. I wish you'd been there. It still hurts. I replied. I wish you'd been honest. That still hurts too. I haven't heard from her since. But I sleep just fine.